All right, after all that, are we ready back there? Ready? Okay, we can start. Great. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming out tonight as our first fundraiser for the Neil Parrott for Congress campaign. Of course, it's right now, we're in an exploratory stage, but what we need to do is be able to get into a point, show that we have grassroots support, show that we have financial support, so when they do go further down the road, that we're ready to just launch right away. And you being here tonight and your help helps us to be ready. I do want to thank some people who are some sponsors, and make sure I announce them. Wayne Alter, Tony Akers, John Barr, Chris Costello, Paul Malott, and Jim and Marianne Pelora are all sponsors for the event. You might remember Jim and Marianne Pelora. Jim Pelora was in charge of the GOP for Maryland for several years when Ehrlich was governor. So he doesn't live here, but I was very, very thankful that he supported this event. So I also, before we keep going, I want to say thank you to everyone who's helped make this happen. You probably know I was in Annapolis all day today, so I really didn't do anything to do this, but my wife April did, and my kids, Patience and Charity and Nielsen's back there. So please give them a round of applause. Thank you. Really appreciate you guys. It was all day. It was good. So thank you. And of course, we did get the chili for Captain Bender's, so that was great. Did you guys like that? It's award-winning chili. I mean, it really is. Actually, he invited me to do a taste test during a Sharpsburg event, and I tasted all these things. I didn't even know which chili was which. And at the very end, I was like, oh, this is the best. And so you had that here tonight. So Captain Bender's, if you're ever down there for lunch, it's a good place to go. So with that, I want to give you just an overview, a couple things that are going on in Annapolis, because I'm very busy down there, to show you what's happening in Annapolis, also to talk about the national scene, what's happening there, and also to talk about what's happening with this district number 6. And I'm probably going to start with that. What's happening? Hey, everybody please welcome Carrie Snyder. Hey, Carrie. I'm going to flash back a little bit, but when I first ran for delegate, that was 8 years ago, so it was 9 years ago. Susanna Warner, you might know that's the daughter of Jim and Judy Warner, was my campaign manager. And she recruited Carrie from Chicago, who came, and they both really worked on the campaign. We had a great campaign, and really a lot of it had to do with Carrie and Susanna. So thank you. It's great to see you tonight. So let's talk about District 6. What's happening? So a little history. We do know that Governor O'Malley, when he was there, he redrew that district. We have a supermajority Democrat in the House and in the state Senate, and so they could draw these lines any way they wanted. Does anybody remember the referendum effort that we had? We got it on the ballot so that we could actually vote, yes or no, do we like this map or do we not like this map? Do you guys remember that? Yes. Thank you for all your help, because with your help, we got enough signatures. There hadn't been a successful referendum effort in over 20 years in Maryland, and then we got 3 done in a row. We used mdpetitions.com. Thankfully, I had a really good idea. I'm an engineer, so I was glad it all came together, but I couldn't have done it without some computer expertise, and I got some people around here who could get this program together to do it exactly the way we needed it to work. And it wasn't the computer program that made it successful. It was people going door to door, getting signatures, downloading it on the machines, and just really working hard to get those signatures. And so with that, we did get it on the ballot. And do you guys remember the ballot question? I just read it recently. It basically said, the U.S. Constitution says that you have to draw these lines every 10 years. Do you agree with that or not? It basically said that. It was ridiculous. We sued over that question and said, that's not right. You can't do that. And we lost the lawsuit. So the Secretary of State is the one who draws the question, who's appointed by the governor. So if there is another referendum effort this year, for instance, the Secretary of State will write the question. And the Secretary of State is appointed now, not by Governor O'Malley, but by Governor Hogan. We would actually get a fair question. So if there's another referendum effort that needs to come forward, know that we will have a question that's more fair, and we'll have more of a chance to succeed on that. The question was written so poorly that I'm going to flash forward now. There's a lawsuit against District 6. And in the lawsuit, they have said that District 6 is illegal. Our Attorney General Frosch really doesn't like that idea at all. So he said, no, you don't even have standing to bring this court case forward. So it went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and our Attorney General Frosch said, well, the people voted on it. The people like this map. They're fine with the map. So why would you, as the Supreme Court, allow them to come forward and challenge the map? Well, 2 Supreme Court justices looked at the wording of the question. One of them called it opaque at best, and the other one really just made fun of it and said, this means nothing. These people don't even know what they're voting for. Basically, it's what the U.S. Supreme Court said when brought to the question. So I feel vindicated by the U.S. Supreme Court. So the court case, it does have standing. Our own Jerry DeWolf from right here in Washington County, John Benisek, who's also right here from Washington County, have been on the lawsuit. There's a couple other people. And so it's actually, I think it's Benisek versus, I think Lamone, who's the person at the Board of Elections. But that court case has gone forward. Now, it's at the U.S. Supreme Court. So just a few months ago in Baltimore, a 3-judge panel, they were appointed by Democrats and Republicans on this 3-judge panel, unanimously said that District 6 is illegal. And Maryland had until the end of March to redraw this map. Now, since then, our Attorney General Frosch appealed, and that decision, now the Supreme Court took it. So they're taking the case. They're going to hear the oral arguments at the end of March, and they're going to make their decision by the end of June. And at that time, we will know exactly what's happening with the map. Now, the actual drawing of the map might take until like September, but this is all going to happen very, very quickly at this point. And of course, we're going to watch it very closely. At the end of March, we'll hear what the Supreme Court justices, what kind of questions they're asking and where they're leaning, whether they like the map or not. I really like what Governor Hogan has done. He has done a phenomenal job of bringing this redistricting issue front and center and saying that Democrats in Maryland are not being fair. They draw a map that was completely unfair and completely wrong, and he's highlighted that several times. And what he did when the lower court made that decision, he formed a board and said, well, we need to have a nonpartisan group drawing these maps, not me as the Republican, not the legislature, but a nonpartisan group. So he has 3 Democrats, 3 unaffiliateds, and 3 Republicans on this panel that are drawing the map. And they're going to give a recommendation to the Maryland General Assembly this March as to what they think the new map should look like based on that court decision. And they actually just came out just the other day with a recommendation. They're very close to the recommendation. And what looks like their recommendation is going to be is that we can fix District 6 by only changing District 6 and District 8. I don't have a map to show you right here, well, except for this one. I'll talk about this later. This is my minimum wage bill. But we can look at this map and see what it looks like. District 6 right now is Garrett, Allegheny, Washington. It goes here into Brunswick and goes up and grabs the city of Hagerstown only, and then it shoots down into Montgomery County. So if we look at the last election, how did David Trone do versus Ami Hober? Well, Ami Hober won in Garrett County. She won in Allegheny County. She won in Washington County. She pretty much tied in Frederick County, but then she got crushed in Montgomery County. That's what happened in the last election, and that's why David Trone is our congressman right now. So what would the new map look like? Well, of course it has to have Garrett, Allegheny, Washington. The commission that the governor's put together says that all of Frederick County would go to District 6, because Frederick right now is divided between 6 is the city down here, and 8. The whole rest of it is District 8. 3/4 of Carroll County is also District 8. That's around here. And then it comes through here and goes and grabs a lot of Montgomery County. So again, the same dynamics happen in District 8 that happen in District 6. The Montgomery County votes totally overwhelm the Carroll County and the Frederick County votes. And so that's where you have Raskin. Jamie Raskin is the congressman there. So this council is saying it'll be Garrett, Allegheny, Washington, all of Frederick, 3/4 of Carroll. That's all District 6 so far. And the top part of Montgomery County is District 6. Almost the rest of Montgomery County, now it's also, Montgomery County has a couple other districts that are here that'll stay just where they are. But the majority of Montgomery County then would form District 8. Does anybody know where Trone lives, which district he lives in right now? He's our District 6 representative, but what district does he live in? 8. John Delaney, when he ran and won, he never lived in District 6, didn't even try to. He lived in District 8. So we have David Trone, who lives in District 8, and Jamie Raskin, who lives in District 8. What I suspect would happen if this map goes the way that the Hogan administration is saying with that nonpartisan board, I suspect that David Trone would run against Jamie Raskin for U.S. Congress in the new District 8, which is solid Montgomery County. And the reason I say that is because he lost in Garrett, Allegheny, Washington. He will lose in Frederick. He will lose in Carroll. And he could barely win this little top piece, maybe. But this is the rural part of Montgomery County. He would probably maybe even lose there. Those numbers do not look good for him. He should not run again in District 6. And if he does, even if he spends a lot of money just like he did last time, there's a good chance that he would lose. I think he's a calculating person and would probably go against Raskin. Also, he might be thinking to himself, I lost to Raskin in District 8 2 years ago. Maybe he wants a grudge match. That would be very interesting. So we'll see what happens there. So that's the status of the court case right now. And people have asked me, hey, on your exploratory campaign, where are you? When would you make your decision? So I really don't have an answer for you tonight as to when I'd make a decision. I can tell you, my wife April is just incredible. Not only does she help tonight happen, but she's trying to encourage me and help me to do the things that need to happen to be successful as a congressional candidate. And so we're moving forward and trying to make those decisions and things happen. So this court case will be decided sometime before the end of June. So it could be at the end of June, but it could be as early as the day after they have their oral arguments. No, I don't suspect that. I suspect it'll happen in the beginning of June. We'll know what they decide. And of course, it could go either way. I give it actually a 60% chance of changing this map. And the reason I do goes back to that referendum effort. I brought that up earlier. The referendum effort, the very first part of a referendum is that you have to go to the Board of Elections and to the Attorney General's office and say, here's my proposed language for the question. And so they give you a preliminary approval, because they could still be sued later on and say, well, that question was not fair. But they give you a preliminary approval, and then they'll defend you in court if someone else comes and attacks you on it. So you have to really do that, get this pre-approval of the language. So we had the language, and we put this map on the back and said, here is a great-looking map. Here's the language. We'd like to use this when people go to sign on this referendum effort. So I got a comment back from the Attorney General's office and said, well, you are not allowed to use that map. I said, why? They said, it's proprietary. And proprietary, why was that map proprietary? I thought that it was the Maryland Department of Planning who did the map, and that's the map we were going to use. But of course, I wanted the colorful map, which wasn't the Department of Planning. It was actually the personal map maker for Governor O'Malley. So what did this personal map maker for Governor O'Malley do? I didn't know at the time. I knew it was proprietary. I knew something was wrong, but it's all come out in the court documents now. Well, what happens? Well, Governor O'Malley said, A, we're going to take out a Republican. I want to make it 7-1. They actually looked at making it 8-0. Can we just make it 8-0? Get rid of all Republicans in the U.S. Congress in Maryland. Do you know why they didn't do that? Because when they made this map, they consulted the 6 sitting congressmen and said, what do you want your district to look like to each of them? Like, Sarbanes, what would you like to see? Well, I'd like, and so they all had different things they really wanted. And so if you look at the map, a lot of the reason why it is the way that it is they really like this community or that community, and they wanted to have this in. And they weren't comfortable with maybe 53, 47%. They're like, no, I need more of a cushion. So let's do 60-40, 60% on a generic, just Democrat versus Republican, about 60-40. So that's what they have. And that's why it's not 8-0. They consulted with the Congress. This is all documented in the court case. I mean, it's very interesting and very disappointing. As I look at this, so this is not the way that I thought they were drawing this map. I knew it was biased. I knew it was wrong. But I didn't know they hired a private consultant. I didn't know that behind closed doors they met with the congressman. I didn't know that Mike Bush and Mike Miller also went behind the closed doors, and they all decided this is what we're going to do. And it didn't really matter when they went on the road show all around the state. It didn't matter what our input was. They'd already made it up. And that's all in the court. So, and also we have from Governor O'Malley himself saying he did it on purpose to make sure that it was a Democrat district. So that's why the 3-judge panel declared unanimously that that's not legal. You can't do that. You're actually violating the free speech right of Republicans And that's why they said District 6 is illegal. Now, this is very different than the other cases all around the country. This is not the whole Maryland congressional map that's illegal. It's only District 6. And it's only District 6 because that's the one that they used to discriminate against Republicans and to change it on purpose, which is different than the North Carolina case. So when you pay attention to it, at the end of March, you'll have two cases that are going forward in the Supreme Court, ours and North Carolina. In North Carolina, they're suing over the whole, every single district, and they're using a different argument. I actually think we have a much stronger argument, and I actually think it's a very small case. I think that the Supreme Court could decide against Maryland's District 6 and not set a huge precedent except for this. You're not allowed to target one person to get him out of office because of their party. I think that would be the only precedent that's set. I think we have about a 60% chance of winning this. The more I look through that court case, I'm like, this is actually, it's a very winning argument, and we should win. Of course, we don't know. We don't know. It could be 5-4. It's just going to be very, very interesting to watch. But that's where we are with the map right now. All right, so I'm going to ask for questions at the end. Very briefly, I'm going to talk about some things that are happening in Maryland. There's so many things happening in Maryland. Let me tell you, we lost 8 House seats. So instead of 50 Republicans, now we're down to 42. So in the House, we got 42 Republicans and 99 Democrats. So that's a super majority. They can pretty much do whatever they want. Now, I was at a conference with Ellen Sauerbrey this last weekend, and she reminded us that when she was here, there were 16 Republicans. She was the minority leader, and there were 16. So we have more than 16. But the issue here is that there's a very different dynamic. The 99 versus the 42, there's a spread on philosophy, and people are trying to govern from different angles. And so we're seeing that really come out this year that we haven't seen as strongly as before. In the state Senate, you guys probably remember that Ben Jealous, he won the Democrat primary. People didn't expect that. He was the most leftist candidate that was running here in Maryland on the Democrat side. But what happened was voter turnout on the Democrat side was low. I think people are just generally just happy with Governor Hogan, and so they weren't too excited about any of the gubernatorial candidates on the Democrat side. So a lot of them just stayed home. But the ones that did get out and vote were very, very liberal. So even though Ben Jealous lost in the general election, he had coattails in that primary election. And a lot of establishment Democrats that have been there for even decades, I think of Nathaniel McFadden in the city of Baltimore, or Mac Middleton, kind of a conservative Democrat from Charles County. They got beat by people much more liberal than they were. And so even though we picked up one Republican seat in the state Senate itself is much more liberal than it has been before. So some bills to watch out for. Euthanasia, that's one that has a really good chance of passing this year. Minimum wage, I actually offered an alternative to a $15 minimum wage statewide, which is a county choice. We actually had a meeting this morning. It seems like this might stall because the Senate and the House are not agreeing on how they want this bill to look at the end. So I don't know. Hopefully it does stall and doesn't pass this year. Hopefully it doesn't pass in all 4 years, but I think that's a little bit, probably too much to hope. But I'm hoping that we can actually stop this one this year. State retirees, they have had their prescription drug insurance just pulled from them, and they said now you have to go to Medicaid Part D. They sued, and there was a stay. So the court said, no, you have to give them this, at least for this year, until we hear the case in the courts. So we don't know where that's going to go, but that is in the courts. And there are bills. I actually had a bill today. My bill was just to restore it the way it was. People say, well, it's too expensive. Well, it's not too expensive. There are state workers. They worked, and yes, it's $11 billion, but it's not $11 billion in 1 year. It's over more than 30 years. It's like 0.1% or 0.2% of our budget. So it's not too expensive. We can let people get what they've earned by working for the state of Maryland. A lot of them didn't work for private companies, especially those that are retired right now, where they may have been able to make more money, but stayed with the state because of the benefits. Anyway, so that's one bill that happened today. And I will take questions because there are so many bills out there that we could talk really all night about them. One is I-270. I really care about I-270. I worked, and Carrie cares. She's Department of Transportation now, which is great. But I worked on the I-270 multimodal corridor study when I worked at the State Highway Administration in Frederick. And as a part of that, we analyzed how could we widen 270. And I do have to say, elections have consequences. Governor Ehrlich, in his first term, towards the end of that said, this 270 multimodal corridor study project, I need you to look at one more alternative. So we were almost done. And the new alternative was express toll lanes. Express toll lanes simply means that the lanes in the middle, the new lanes that we're going to build, will be tolled, and the existing lanes will be free. And he got that done, actually, on I-95. If you're headed north towards Delaware, he's got a section that's already done, and that was because of Governor Ehrlich. I think had he been reelected as governor, I-270 would be widened right now, and those express toll lanes would be there. He wasn't, but thankfully Governor Hogan's elected, and so they say it's a $9 to $11 billion project where we're going to widen I-495, widen I-270, and actually take what's one of the worst congested highway areas in the entire country and make it better, make it so that it can actually work. Yet, we have a lot of Montgomery County Democrats who just keep offering bill after bill after bill. Their only intent is to kill the project. Like they say they want to delay it. They say they want more studies. We've studied it for 20 years. Like that was way back when I worked at the state highway. That's crazy. But they keep doing these things, and their only intent is to kill the project. It's very disappointing. But I could go on and on about really the philosophy difference between, yes?
Why would the Democrats want to kill infrastructure?
Well, okay, that's a great question. There are lots of battles going on in Annapolis. One of the battles is that there's, I'm going to call it a false belief, that we just need to get everybody on mass transit, that we shouldn't have roads, that we should force people to have congestion, and we should make them stop in traffic so that they take some other form of transportation. But what's interesting about that is that they're inconsistent, because there's another project that these same people are trying to kill, and it's a project that would take maglev. It would go from Baltimore to D.C. with a stop at BWI. I mean, you want to get cars off the road? This is a great project, because the maglev, we're not paying for it with any state dollars at all. It would be some federal money, but mostly a Japanese firm would be building this project, and it would go underneath I-295. It's actually very, very exciting. You could get from, all right, Carrie, how 15 minutes?
11 minutes from BWI to DC.
11 minutes. There you go. BWI to D.C.? How about Baltimore to D.C.? 15. All right.
16 minutes.
16 minutes. There you go. So huge, fast project. If you're going Baltimore to D.C., you don't even stop at BWI. You just whiz right by it. If you're going at BWI, you get off your airplane, you go down the elevator, and you get your luggage at the luggage racks. Then you go down the elevator again, and you get on this train, and you're in Baltimore or D.C. within 11 minutes. I mean, it's quite amazing. And think about rental cars. They're not going to rent the car. They're going to go down, get on the metro, maybe get an Uber once they get there for that last mile. It's very practical. And yet, these same folks are totally against this project, and I don't understand why. It's totally mass transit.
It hurts their businesses in Baltimore. And the thing with 270, what's the majority of people out there? Republicans.
Well, you're right. A lot of...
That's why they hate our guts.
They just want to punish us. Well, anyway, those are two big projects. I totally support the I-270 project. We couldn't build that thing soon enough. It should have been built 20 years ago. We've got to build it. And this maglev project, I think, is a big, great thing. It'll help Baltimore. It'll help our whole region. But I could talk again, I'll take questions at the end, a lot about Maryland. I do want to just shift just a little bit to federal. Do you guys know where President Trump is right now? Vietnam, right? And he's about to talk to who? Kim Jong-un. Right, from North Korea. I mean, we actually might have an end to the actual North Korean, South Korean conflict. I mean, that's what they're talking about. Could you ever have imagined that under an Obama presidency? Right. No. We look at international policy, and we look at even how we treated the Muslims. They would never, ever label like Muslim extremists. That's what we're dealing with. It wasn't just, our friendly neighborhood country. They were Muslim extremists that were terrorists, and they were trying to kill our citizens. And yet, President Obama would never utter those words. Under political correctness, we were just hurting our own country. And also, what's happening with China? We've trade, and we had a trade deficit of billions of dollars, trillions when you add it up. It's been horrible for our country. We're just giving them our money all the time. And also, not only our money, but our trade, our secrets, how we actually make things. They're like stealing that right from us. We're the ones who came up with it, and they're stealing it from us. So that's China. And President Trump is on the verge of having a new agreement with China. And I just saw a post the other day that we're now allowed to sell rice to China. I mean, who would have ever thought? I mean, it's amazing. But these are breakthroughs. This is a breakthrough time, and I'm very excited for what's happening. Of course, we look at our southern border. We've got to enforce our immigration laws, and we haven't for so long. I talked to someone who's kind of a moderate just earlier today on the phone, and he said it's just very unfortunate because what we've created in our country is an underclass. And he's exactly right. Illegal aliens that are in our country are the underclass. They don't necessarily get paid minimum wage. They do whatever. They're living below our standards. Why? Why is that even created? Why is that even allowed? How does that even happen? It happens because we never enforced our law. We, A, have porous borders. B, we don't enforce our laws. C, companies could hire illegal aliens, and they don't get in trouble for it. And they're doing that right now. We've got to have an immigration policy that makes sense. We've got to have an immigration policy that we actually follow. And we need to get rid of the second class. We need to help people who are here illegally. They need to go back to their country. They need to go back, and we need to help those who are here legally to make sure that there is no second class. And they wouldn't be if we had people who are all here legally. You know, President Reagan in the 80s, and he's one of my heroes, love President Reagan. He tried something. He said, let's do amnesty, and then let's also enforce our borders. Well, they did amnesty, but they never enforced our borders. So what does that make our country? It makes us more of a magnet than we ever were. The message is, hey, you just come to our country, you live here illegally long enough, they will eventually make you a U.S. citizen. Well, that's the wrong message. We can't send that message again. We should have learned from the 80s that doesn't work, makes us more of a magnet, and we need to have a better policy. So I'm glad to see President Trump really putting his foot down and saying, no, we've got to build the wall. And thankfully, hopefully that will be moving forward. Now, what I really wish happened was that the last Congress under Ryan would have done the right thing and built the wall. That's what needed to happen. And I don't think that President Trump was willing at the time to go head-to-head against the Republicans, but I think he needed to, unfortunately, because we had so many Republicans that were just not willing to do the hard choices and hard decisions that needed to be made. So he didn't. There's so many issues we could talk about at the federal level. But let me just say this. We lost the House. And because the Republicans lost the House, they have the Senate, so many things that we could be doing and we were doing, we cannot do anymore. Even though we got more of a cushion in the U.S. Senate, in the House, we've lost it. So a lot of these bills that we were putting forward are not there. And now look at the House. What are they doing? I mean, they're just chomping at the bit to impeach President Trump, like for any reason at all that they can even think of. You know, the Mueller investigation, it's about to come out. They haven't really found anything at all. And they're going to show that. There's really nothing to it. But now they've like pivoted already. Before it even comes out, they've pivoted. Well, we're going to get them on this. Well, that's not a way to govern. We need to have the Republicans take back the House. And I tell you what, District 6 in Maryland is going to be one of those flipped seats. We only need 19 flipped seats, and the Republicans have control of the U.S. House of Representatives again, and it starts right here in District 6. And that's why I'm so thankful that you all are here. That's why I'm thankful for the opportunity to be able to move forward and flip District 6 in Maryland so we can actually flip the U.S. House of Representatives, no longer have Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, but have someone else who's a conservative. So, thank you. And with that, I will take a couple questions, if there are any.
Hypothetical. 6 stays the way it is.
Yes.
I hope that isn't, but this is a crazy country these days. Are you damn the torpedoes full speed ahead, hoping that you can get enough people behind you to still flip 6?
Well, I tell you what, this district is hard to win. Dan Bongino did a fantastic job. He came within a percentage point, 5,000 votes. I mean, he was fantastic. Great candidate, great year. And I didn't know that he was that close. And of course, Hogan just really went beyond our expectations that year. So It's hard to win. But what's going to happen, let's say that 2020 doesn't change at all. 2022, it will change. It has to change in 2022 because of the census. We have the 2020 census. We'll redraw the maps in 21. Hogan will be the one who puts forward a map. I think the Democrats, frankly, will be embarrassed to even try to do what they just did 10 years ago. And his map will probably stand. So we're going to have a much more conservative Western Maryland district in 2022. And to answer your question, that's part of why it's an exploratory committee. I don't know that answer. I'm going to analyze it when I find out what do the courts do, and then make that decision after that point. Good question.
You mentioned the minimum wage and stuff. What is it projected to go up to?
So in Maryland, they're talking about taking the minimum wage to $15 an hour minimum wage statewide. I put forward a bill that said you could do it county by county, which they're already doing that. Montgomery County already has a higher wage than Maryland's 1010. So does Baltimore City, and so does Prince George's County. They all have already done this. So it would be easy for them to keep doing this. The argument that I get back when I say, let's do county choice, is they're saying, well, if I'm Montgomery County and I just made ours $15 an hour minimum wage, and Frederick County only decides to go to 12, well, there's a disparity, and we're going to lose businesses in Montgomery County to Frederick County. Well, I look at them and smile. I say, yes, that's true. And that's why, if you have county choice, you can make the best decision for your constituents. You can balance what's going to help business versus what you think is going to help people, and you can make those decisions at that level. If you do 15-hour minimum wage statewide, we don't get to make that decision because Washington County, who's on our north? Pennsylvania. What's their minimum wage? $7.25. Who's on our south? West Virginia. What's their minimum wage? $8.25. Who's to the southeast? Oh, that's Virginia. What's their minimum wage? $7.25. If we're at 15, we're over double the minimum wage of these other states. And do you think Macy's is even going to look at us? No. We already lost to them for a reason. We're not business friendly in Maryland like we need to be. And having a minimum wage that's way above any of our neighbors is not going to help get people to come to Maryland. And I was talking to someone else today. We need to see Hagerstown, we need to see our areas start to thrive. But one way to do that is to have better business policies. Help people to want to move in here, have businesses move in. When we were successful in Hagerstown, we had so many businesses. We had Fairchild. We had the piano building company. We had people that made autos here, cars. I mean, the list goes on and on. And these companies, that's what made Hagerstown a great place to be. And we need to bring businesses back to the city of Hagerstown, businesses back to this area. And I can tell you the way not to do that is this $15 minimum wage. It's going to be very, very hurtful to all of Western Maryland, all the Eastern Shore, and Southern Maryland. We have to compete with these neighboring states. So I'm hoping that at the end of the day, it's not a straight $15 an hour minimum wage. Let me go back here.
One woman took prayer and Bible out of public school. Where were Christians? Abortion became legal. Where were Christians? Homosexuals came out of the closet. Where were Christians? Now we got barbaric abortion where they can take a baby, lay it beside the woman, and the doctors and nurses decide if it lives or dies. Where are we as Christians? 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from the wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and heal their land. The problem in America are the Christians. We are not living for Jesus like we're supposed to be.
Well, let me talk to that a little bit. That verse is absolutely true. We do need to humble ourselves, so we need to pray for our country. There's a lot going on. We look at New York and the bill that they just passed. I mean, it's horrific. And we look at the U.S. senators. What just happened? They just had a bill that said, okay, if there's a baby that's born, should we save the baby or not? It was maybe in the process of abortion that the woman doesn't want it anymore. And these U.S. senators said, yeah, you can just let it die, because they decided not to pass that bill. That's horrific. I can't imagine.
Operative word there, not he or she, it. That's their thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, you're right. And so in Maryland, where are we? Where are we on abortion laws? It's unfortunate. In Maryland, we have, not a lot of people know it, one of the most liberal abortion laws in the entire country. That's why Carhart comes here to perform his late-term abortions. He still has his clinic. He moved it from one place in Montgomery County to another place. Now he's in Bethesda. He is performing late-term abortions, second-term, third trimester abortions. People come from all over the country here to have that abortion done. It's horrific. It needs to be stopped. I think most Marylanders and Americans understand a lot more than we did back in the early 70s. You know, it's not a blob of tissue. Actually, we can see the heartbeat. You know what? We can actually see a 4D sonogram. We can see the fingers. We can see the nose. We can see this little baby that's inside there. And we also know that preemies, they've become a lot younger now when we were able to save them. So we also know that there's pain, that there's fetuses can feel pain, which of course they're little babies, of course they can feel pain. But we know that now after a certain time frame. So I think there's a lot less tolerance now for just abortion anytime, anywhere, for any reason than there used to be. Now, you might know, I talked about how there hadn't been a successful referendum effort in over 20 years. Well, what was it 20 years ago? It was one of two, and I think it was abortion. They passed this very liberal bill in Maryland, and then it got enough signatures, so it got on the ballot. But then on the ballot, the people of Maryland voted to keep this very liberal law. So very disappointing, but we did vote on it at the time. I think if we were to vote on that same bill again today, I don't think we would go that way, especially with a good PR campaign, which we would need to have. There was talk, or is talk, Mike Bush, coming into this session, said that he wanted to introduce a bill that would make Maryland's abortion laws part of the Maryland Constitution. So take our very, very liberal laws and make it part of the Maryland Constitution. Now, in my mind, that was all fear-mongering. Why did he come up with that? And he came up with it right before the elections. Why did he do that? Well, because they're saying, well, now with Kavanaugh in the U.S. Supreme Court, they might overturn Roe v. Wade. Well, what if we do? What if we overturn Roe v. Wade? What happens? Well, what happens is it goes back to the state laws. Whatever the state laws are what the rules are. And so in Maryland, we don't have to change anything. Our laws are already very liberal. But Mike Bush wanted to put this in the state constitution. So hopefully that doesn't happen. I heard some good news tonight that it might not be happening. I think he would have a challenge in the state Senate to get that through. A little bit of a challenge. I don't think Mike Miller likes this bill, thankfully. But that's something we're going to have to fight here in Maryland in this year. That's one of the fights. And if it gets on the ballot, we're going to have to work and defeat it at the ballot. So let me go over here. Linda?
What is being proposed regarding illegal sanctuary in Maryland?
Yep, so that's another bill in Maryland. We've stopped this bill for the last 4 years. So some very liberal legislators are saying that they want to make Maryland a sanctuary state for illegal aliens. So what would that mean? Well, it would mean that illegal aliens could come to our state and that we wouldn't ever turn them over to ICE, basically. The thing that's going on right now in Frederick County, which is great. I like that little jazz. I used to have that on my phone. I really like that one. I need to find it again. So there's a 287G program, Sheriff Chuck Jenkins, he has where he works with ICE and where he's able to keep illegal aliens who've committed crimes. These aren't just ones off the street. They've committed crimes, and he's working with ICE to turn them back over. If we had the sanctuary state, we wouldn't work with ICE at all. It's terrible. It needs to be defeated. And let me tell you who is in Annapolis working to defeat this harder than anyone else. And I'm just so thankful for them, I can't even tell you. I've been on the judiciary for the last 8 years, and this bill's come out for the last 3 or 4 years. And we have hearings, but this hearing, they always wait until later in the night when they even bring the bill forward. So it might be starting at 5 maybe, and it keeps going. But it goes past midnight, and one group that I'm very, very impressed with are legal people who came from other countries, legal immigrants, and especially from Montgomery County, and especially Koreans. They have been there. They have, more than any other group, stopped this from moving forward. And I've already talked to them, actually, this last Saturday. I talked to the group leader, and they are going to be here again this year, working very, very diligently to stop this horrible bill. They understand, if you're coming to this country, this is a privilege, and you need to come in the right way, and you need to come in and take your time. They took the time to do it right, and we can't simply allow people who are illegal to come in across the border and then set up in Maryland and then have some kind of law that even if you commit crimes, we're not going to turn you over to have you deported. That just doesn't make sense.
Has
So,
any they're against 287G, they're promoting illegal sanctuary in Western Maryland, and they're coming on to the Hagerstown Community College to seek assistance.
I haven't heard about them, and I think I should talk to you about that and try and find out more information. But what I have heard about is Casa de Maryland. You may have heard about them. And they are set up in, I think it's actually Prince George's County. That makes sense. Casa de Maryland, they just keep spreading out. And what they're trying to do is help illegal aliens. Basically what they are is an entry point. Illegal aliens can go to Casa, get help there, and they try and get them illegal work because, it's not allowed to work legally as an illegal alien in our country. And they set up all these things. They've pushed for driver's licenses, and it's just very disappointing where we are. A bill that just passed in the Maryland House of Delegates was that our hard-earned taxpayer dollars, they want, not only, this was the first thing that we got to referendum, remember, was illegal aliens getting in-state college tuition benefits. So we're paying 2/3 of their college costs already when they go to a Maryland school. So the bill that we just passed said, well, not only are we going to pay 2/3 of their college tuition costs, but they're going to be eligible for scholarships, just like any other Marylander. Like scholarships, when they graduate, they can't work in this country legally. They're not U.S. citizens. It just doesn't make sense. And yet, that's what's happening in our state. So hopefully we can stop this sanctuary state bill. Let me see. Yes?
I just had a quick question. Don't the federal immigration laws supersede the states as far as the sanctuary cities? I mean, there is a national federal immigration law system. Well, how do these cities keep coming up with the sanctuary?
Isn't there a hierarchy that they have to follow?
The federal law will trump state law if what's being required of the citizens is different, but if you're talking about using state resources, the federal government can't require the state to use its resources to enforce federal law. So if you've got this county police or the state police saying we're not going to turn them over to ICE, they can't require that. There were some proposals by Jeff Sessions and the Justice Department to deny federal funds for law enforcement if they are a sanctuary city, but that's been held up in some court cases where they go out and they search for a judge in a liberal district in a liberal circuit and get a ruling and put in place a nationwide injunction. So that is going to be something that is going to take some time before it works its way up to the Supreme Court. But you can't require a state or local government to use local resources to enforce federal law.
Yep. I'm going to just finish with two things, because we're talking about lawlessness in our society. We're talking about federal laws where states or cities are intentionally not enforcing those laws and actually going against those laws. We saw in California where I think it was the mayor actually called the illegal aliens in the area and said, hey, watch out, ICE is coming, because they alerted her first. I mean, really? How does that happen? But we've had this problem where we're not enforcing our immigration laws. We have to enforce it. And we've allowed it to go on for decades, where we have what's law in the books. Like, for instance, the law in the books is states are not allowed to give in-state college tuition benefits to illegal aliens. That's a federal law. And yet Maryland just completely violates that law and goes ahead and does it anyway. There's another area where we're not following the law, and that's with marijuana. The federal law says it's a Schedule I drug. It says it's illegal. It says you can't experiment with it, you can't use it for medicine, you can't use it at all. It's illegal. And yet, a lot of states now have medical marijuana laws. We just set it up in Maryland. Several states have recreational marijuana laws. It's creating a lawless society where we're going to ignore the high law and just do whatever we feel like. That's not practical. That's not a way to live. We've got to have laws that we actually follow. And I think some action needs to happen at the national level. The national level, the Congress needs to be leaders. And unfortunately, they're not being the leaders that they need to be. To actually say, here's going to be the law. Look, they have to change. And they have to make it so that it's practical. And they also have to enforce the laws that they have. So with that, I want to say thank you. Thanks for coming out. I want to take other questions a little bit here. But thank you again. This means a lot. And this is a great great startup as we form this exploratory committee and keep running for it. So thank you very much. God bless you and have a good night. Hey, how'd it go?
Well, I think it went real well from my perspective.
Good.